man, Future Wizard's done me right dirty.
Hey everybody, Future Wizard here, and I'm going to show you a tutorial using Reason and Phaseplant on how to make jungle style bass lines. The kind you hear in like rollers and mid-90s jungle tracks, kind of like King of the Rollers. You're hearing it a bit more as there's kind of a throwback session going on right now, a renaissance of jungle, if you will. So what I did here in Reason is I just put together a little drum loop. It's not a sample. I actually went through and did the drums myself, but it sounds like a sample. Alright, so what we need now is a bass line to go over it. And so what I'm going to do, I have a new instance of Phaseplant. So let's name this Jungle Bass. Nice loud mechanical keyboard. And we're going to just start from scratch here. The first thing we want to do is make a group and an analog wave and put that inside of the group. So right now we have a saw wave untouched. Pretty loud. First thing I do on Phaseplant, I usually throw a limiter in. It has one built in. It's a snap-in. I use the Kilohearts subscription, so I have access to all the snap-ins. Highly recommend. It's $9 a month, $10, something like that. It's cheap. So let's throw this to about -4, so it never goes over that level. Go down an octave. Now, if we wanted to do a Reese, for example, you could set that to unison 2. But that's for another video. So we're going to set this back to 1, switch it to sine wave. And the goal here is to make a simple sine bass or sub bass. So because there's clipping in between, we want to add a little bit of attack, a little bit of release, so when you're switching notes, there's no audible clip. As it is right now, you can play more than one note. I don't like the way that sounds. Most sub bass is just one note at a time. So let's switch it to one voice. That's good. We could also set a glide. Cool. So now it's kind of gliding up and down in between notes, which is a cool sound. I think a lot of sub basses do that. It's pretty standard. To make it sound more like a jungle bass, though, first thing I like to do is we throw some distortion on there, and that's going to be saturation. I put the dynamics pretty low, mix up high. You can see that's going into red, so we'll throw the threshold down a bit. Get it right around that 0 mark, maybe just turn down the gain. It's not too loud. So let me bring Phaseplant up a bit, stick it, move that up. That's good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to up the unison to 2 and turn the detune maybe a little less than halfway, so we get this sound. And as you can hear, the LFO sound or the wobble increases in speed as you go up in notes. So what you can do about this is you can throw a macro on. Let's just call it speed. Let's have it affect the detune by a little bit. So now I'm going to set up my remote on this one. And just a sec here. Got that on my launch key. So now I can control it with my keyboard. So we can do this. And that sounds pretty cool. So already you can have a bass line. So let's just throw something in here. Nothing too important. We don't want to make a block. Alright. Again, I use Reason. I love it. I've been using it forever. It is great. I'm on Reason 10. I haven't picked up 11 yet. Just kind of holding off for whatever reason. This is, I can already tell, this is a pretty high octave. So let's bring it down to C2. There we go. So it's going to go. You can have it go a little higher. I'm not worrying too much about the melody right now. Just something to show you how the bass line's actually going to sound. Now I want the speed to be a bit up, so I'm turning up the speed on my keyboard. And I like Phaseplant because it shows you what's actually going on, which is pretty cool. Now this is without. Let me go ahead and mute all this and here's just the bass. And without the distortion, so you can hear the distortion adds a lot, adds some upper frequencies. You got to remember, with a lot of listeners listening to your tracks, they're going to be on cell phones, they're going to be on headphones. They're not going to hear those low sub frequencies, so you want to have some upper harmonics, and that's where the saturation comes in. Now let's go ahead and stop this, play it with the drums again. Add in some random notes here. Alright, you could make a better melody. I'm not going to spend time on that. This is just strictly the how-to. Alright, so we have Phaseplant again. Now we could kick this up a notch by adding a wavetable here. Now the analog, the sine waves going through this output, this wavetable is not going anywhere. All we're using it for is FM synthesis. The way we do that, we click this green plus button and have it affect the phase on our main wave. You can already hear a difference, right? So let's turn down the octave on the modulator. Right, so that's cool. That brings some upper frequencies. Now what we can do, we can throw a filter between the wave and the output. So that wave's going to go through this filter, right? So let's set it about 100. So everything above 100 hertz is filtered out. It's a low pass. So what we're going to do is make an envelope. And again, you can stop without doing any of this. You'll still have a sub. I like to go a little further. Set up an envelope with a bit of an attack. Every time you hit a note, it's going to go through this. And you can see how fast it's going by this guy. Right? So first thing I'm going to do is have this envelope affect the cutoff. So it's going to turn it up as it begins. Set it a little lower. Right? And what we can do here is have it also affect the frame of the waveform, because it goes through this whole waveform, and you could see right here how it's actually distorting that. So it's not the coolest right there, you know, we could make it a lot cooler than that. Let's actually try a different one. Let's try a morph from saw to square to triangle. Sure. Let's have it go backwards. Slow it down. Cool. That sounds decent, not amazing. So what we could do from here is we could throw on something that Kilohearts calls multipass, and this comes with the Phaseplant subscription. It's like $10 a month. Highly recommend. It gives you access to Phaseplant along with all the snap-ins. And snap-ins are just little effects you can drag and drop here. Very cool. So let's open multipass. And multipass separates your sound into frequencies. Just the mids, just the highs, just the lows. So in this case, we don't want to affect the lows. You want to keep your sub frequencies mono, so they're ideal for a like a club sound system. There's no phasing issues. There's a whole nother video to explain that stuff, and there's a lot of great videos on YouTube already. Just look up bass phase issues, that sort of thing. But for the sake of fun, I'm going to throw a stereo width increaser on the mid, so it's going to spread it out a bit more. And let's just solo this. Alright. Then we're going to throw chorus on here. Let's do about that. Alright, so that sounds cool, nice and wide. If you're listening on headphones, you can hear that. Let's throw that back in with everything. That's creepy crawling. That's dope. Now, if we didn't always want that kind of gritty sound, we can basically have the modulator lower the sound or the gain of this modulator here. So this is the mod wheel, and it's controlling the level of this modulator that's affecting this operator, right? It's easy when you're looking at it. Don't worry about the terminology. So when we have the mod wheel up, very clean, sub bass, we turn the mod wheel down. You get that kind of nasty. And then, you could throw all kinds of stuff on here. Comb filters. And you can modulate all that on LFOs, right? So you can have an LFO moving with the beat, affecting your comb filter. And it can be subtle. You can do whatever you want. Phaseplant plus multipass is insane. It's so cool. So let's just listen to these random notes we have with the drums. Very cool. And now let's say we want to add some distortion in on just the mids. Let's actually, instead of just distortion, let's use the Saturator, which is a saturator that adds like fuzz and drive. And you can change your wavetable to whatever you want. There's a bunch that come with Phaseplant. Kind of an ugly melody. But you get the idea. You could mess with all of it, speed up the multiple possibilities. But all it comes down to is having a sine wave with unison 2 and detuned. Super simple. I mean, it's really easy once you have that. And if you start listening to jungle tracks, especially the newer ones, a lot of jump up, you'll hear that kind of wobble. But the cool thing about it, it does not use an LFO, so the speed between notes is different. And that kind of gives it that old analog sound because they were detuning sine waves back in the day, so they weren't using LFOs as much. So it gives it that vintage sound. So have fun with that. And again, check out Phaseplant. It is amazing. Check out Reason if you've never tried it. You can do all sorts of things. I can get into all this on another video. But that's all I got for you today, so have fun.